Bada bing, bada boom.
Okay, let's think about this for a second. What happens when a president's signature, the one on official documents, isn't actually theirs? What if it's applied by a machine?
It sounds a bit like science fiction, doesn't it? Or maybe political drama. But it's very real, and it's actually right at the center of this growing investigation by the House Oversight Committee.
Exactly. So today we're going to do a deep dive into this whole situation. It's an inquiry that's raising some pretty big questions about using an auto pin while former President Biden was in office.
And it's not just about the pen itself. It seems to be spiraling into these broader conversations about, a president's mental fitness, how transparent health reports really are, things like that.
Yeah, fundamental stuff. And for this deep dive, we're looking directly at the source, really. We've got excerpts from a YouTube video transcript with Chairman James Comer himself. So it's his perspective on the committee's work.
And our goal here, for you listening, is pretty straightforward. We want to pull out the key pieces of information, the important takeaways from what Comer is saying.
Right. Give you a shortcut to understanding who's involved, what the main claims are, and what the potential consequences might be.
So you get the whole picture, hopefully, without getting bogged down in all the, the weeds.
Okay, so where did this specific focus on the auto pin really start? It seems like it gained a lot of traction after some comments from former President Trump.
Yeah, that's right. He was on Sunday Morning Futures, and he was pretty direct. He said, and I think this is a direct quote, "I don't think Biden knew what was happening."
Which is a strong statement on its own.
It is. And he didn't stop there. He then said something like, "I think that the auto pin is one of the biggest scandals in the history of this country."
Wow. Okay, biggest scandals in history. That's quite a claim.
Definitely. And what's interesting is he specifically zeroed in on finding out who operated the auto pin. Not just that it was used, but who was physically doing it.
Right. The focus on the operator implies someone else was making the decision, doesn't it? Not just a machine following orders.
Precisely. So with Trump putting that out there so forcefully, the House Oversight Committee, led by Chairman James Comer, decided, okay, we need to really broaden our investigation here.
And they seem to be taking it very seriously. I mean, it's not just asking nicely for people to come in and chat.
No, definitely not. When they didn't get the voluntary cooperation they wanted, they moved to subpoenas. We saw that with Dr. Kevin O'Connor, the former physician. He initially declined, and boom, subpoena.
Which is a legal order, right? You can't just ignore it easily.
Exactly. It compels testimony or documents. And Comer emphasizes the committee is united. They want to get the truth. He's even mentioned holding people in contempt of Congress if they don't show up for interviews and depositions.
Contempt of Congress, that sounds serious. What does that actually involve?
Oh, it's very serious. It can lead to fines, potentially even jail time for obstructing their investigation. A deposition, by the way, is formal testimony given under oath just outside of a courtroom setting.
Okay. So they mean business. And what are the core questions they're really driving at with all this?
Well, two main things really stand out. First, who is authorizing the use of the auto pin? And second, they're exploring these really serious allegations of a, quote, massive cover-up of Joe Biden's mental decline.
A massive cover-up. Those are strong words.
Yeah.
It really shows what the committee suspects, or at least what they're investigating.
Absolutely. Which brings us nicely to the key people caught up in this. Dr. Kevin O'Connor, the former physician, is definitely a central figure. He's scheduled for that deposition now after the whole subpoena situation.
And what specifically do they want from him? It's about the health reports he issued.
Yes, exactly. Comer was quite blunt about it. He said something to the effect of, he doesn't think anyone in America believes that Joe Biden was anywhere near as healthy as Dr. O'Connor would continuously publish.
So they're questioning the accuracy, maybe even the honesty of those official health statements.
Right. It's not just medical questions, as Comer put it, but also legal questions about those public reports. It suggests they're probing whether those reports were deliberately misleading.
Okay, that makes sense. Questioning the truthfulness, the intent behind them. Who else is on their list?
Well, there's a list of 5 other high-profile aides they want to interview. People from Biden's inner circle. Let's see, former Chief of Staff Ron Klain.
Okay.
Former Counselor Steve Ricchetti. Former Senior Advisor Mike Donilon. Former Deputy Chief of Staff Bruce Reed. And former Senior Advisor for Communications Anita Dunn.
That's a lot of senior people. Have they all agreed to come in?
Well, that leads to another point. Anthony Brunel, who was Jill Biden's chief of staff, apparently didn't come in voluntarily.
So he got a subpoena too.
That's right. He's also been subpoenaed, and the committee specifically said they believe Brunel was a major part of that inner circle involved in this alleged cover-up.
A major part? They're not mincing words.
Not at all.
Yeah.
And then there's Neera Tanden. This is an interesting detail. A witness apparently identified her as the person that was actually putting the documents into the AutoPin.
Okay, so potentially the operator Trump was asking about?
Potentially. But here's the kicker. The witness also claimed Tanden was never around Joe Biden when she did this.
Wait, she was using the AutoPin but wasn't actually with the president.
That's the claim, which, immediately raises the question, well, who was giving the instructions then? If not the president directly, who told her to put the document in and press the button?
That adds a whole new layer, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The chain of command for the signature itself.
Exactly. It's not just if it was used, but how and under whose direction.
And I heard there were mentions of others too, like Ronnie Jackson.
Yeah, he came out, he was Trump's doctor, remember? Mentioned in the context of, medical questions and standards, presumably. And there were also references to Jake Tapper and an anticipated book by Karine Jean-Pierre
Right.
as sort of external sources that the committee feels might reinforce this idea of a massive cover-up. They seem to be pulling information from various places.
Okay, so let's step back and look at the AutoPin issue itself.
Yeah.
What are the big legal or practical problems the committee sees here?
Well, the absolute core issue, the paradox they keep hitting on is why use it at all, especially when President Biden was apparently in the White House.
Yeah, you mentioned that statistic earlier, right? Something like 75%.
That's the number Comer cited, yeah. Something like 75% of the AutoPin signatures happened while President Biden was at the White House, which is, well, it's stunning if true.
It really is. If he's right there, why not just sign the document? It makes you ask, like the committee is asking, why was it such a secretive process?
Exactly. The secrecy itself raises suspicion. Was there something to hide about why the AutoPin was necessary even when he was physically present?
And this isn't just procedural nitpicking, is it? Comer mentioned real legal consequences.
Oh, definitely. He stressed there are major legal implications, especially because this involves many executive orders and many pardons that were signed with an AutoPin.
So the actual validity of those orders and pardons could be challenged.
Potentially, yes. It could open a huge legal can of worms about presidential authority, what constitutes a valid signature, especially in our sort of modern age. How is presidential consent legally defined and proven? This could force a re-examination of all that.
And it's not just the House committee looking into this now.
No. Apparently, Pam Bondi has announced a separate independent investigation over at the Department of Justice into the illegal use of the AutoPin.
Okay, so multiple investigations now. This seems like it could really snowball.
It certainly could. Which brings us to another really critical piece of this puzzle, executive privilege.
Right. The idea that a president can keep certain communications private from Congress.
Exactly. But the big development here is that President Trump apparently waived executive privilege for these individuals.
He waived it. What does that mean practically for these interviews and depositions?
It means those officials, like Klain, Ricchetti, Donilon, all of them, they don't have that shield to hide behind anymore. They can't refuse to answer questions by claiming the conversations were protected by executive privilege from that time.
So they are going to have to answer our questions, as Comer put it. Does the source, the video, give any hint about whether this waiver has already led to new information?
The clip we examined didn't detail specific new revelations because of the waiver just yet, but it fundamentally changes the dynamic. It removes a major obstacle for the committee.
Right. Makes it much harder for people to stonewall.
Exactly. It signals the committee can push harder now and likely get answers they wouldn't have gotten otherwise. It could definitely speed things up.
Okay, so let's try to wrap this up. We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. What are the main takeaways, the big unresolved questions left hanging?
Well, I think it boils down to a few key things. First, who really did authorize the AutoPin's use, especially in those instances where Biden was supposedly present?
Right. And second, what was the actual state of the president's health compared to what was being reported officially by Dr. O'Connor? Was there really a disconnect, a cover-up, like the committee alleges?
And third, what are the full legal and practical consequences if major executive actions like orders and pardons were signed using this AutoPin under questionable circumstances? That's huge.
Absolutely. So, for you listening, maybe the thing to chew on is this. Considering everything we've talked about, how signatures happen, how presidential health gets communicated, What does this whole investigation tell us about transparency? About public trust in the highest levels of government?
Yeah, and maybe think about how you, just as an informed citizen, process official information going forward, especially when these kinds of questions pop up about the basic mechanics, the very processes of how governing happens. Is definitely something to think about.